Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. My name is Bill Horan and I'm here with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Corey Kaufman. And today we're shining the spotlight on a podcast from Long Island that has a lot of parents and mothers laughing.
I was thinking about starting my own podcast. Do you think anyone would want to hear what I have to think about life, Bill?
You never know, Corey, but today our guest is a podcast entrepreneur. Her name is Amy Wilson, and she started the podcast Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. Amy, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thanks for having me.
Amy, tell us, how did this podcast get started?
So our podcast is called What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. And What Fresh Hell is actually something that the humorist Dorothy Parker used to say. Bill, I bet you know who Dorothy Parker is, and Corey, I wonder if that is somebody who's too far before your time. But she was a humorist in the sort of early to mid 20th century, and she would answer the doorbell or her phone by saying, "What fresh hell is this? Now what?" basically. And my partner, Margaret Abels, and I, we do the podcast together. Margaret's mom used to say this whenever she sort of came around the corner to see the crayon scribblings on the wall or the spaghetti all over the kid. She'd say, "What fresh hell is this?" And so Margaret and I were both comedians who were writing about parenting and books and on Nick Mom, which was a video channel, and decided we wanted to try to start a podcast. And it was Margaret's idea. She came to me with the idea fully formed. It's going to be called What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. I said, okay, that was the easiest title decision I ever made. And we took it from there.
Now, are both, I'm sorry to interrupt, but are both you and Margaret moms?
Yes, we are. So
okay.
Each of us are moms of three. It's funny, we have strange things in common. So we're both moms of three, two boys and then a girl. We're both married to guys named David. We're both Irish Catholic by sort of, upbringing. And that is where the similarities end. Other than that, we have found over 150 episodes that we are pretty opposite in our approaches to parenting. We're pretty Ernie and Bert, Felix and Oscar, whatever metaphor you want to use. I am kind of a by the book, never met a study I didn't like, plan ahead kind of person. And Margaret is not those things. She is definitely a where are my keys, running late, and it's probably fine kind of mom. And so I think our sensibilities come together really well on the show.
I was going to say different people often make for a great show because of obviously the different backgrounds. So it sounds like you got the right chemistry to start out with. Yes.
And we also have, so my kids are, I have two teens and a tween. I have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old. Margaret has an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 8-year-old. So between us, we cover a pretty wide range of ages and stages, and we try to in our episodes talk about things like what to do when your kid's just like you, or what to do when your kid is nothing like you and they're completely confounding. There are ways that applies to a 2-year-old and a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old, and we try to sort of go through them all in each episode.
Mm-hmm. So was there like some sort of like a specific experience that inspired you to start this podcast? Did you have your own like what fresh hell moment?
Oh my gosh, every day in every way, we like to say. I did. So before this podcast, I had a parenting website and then a book that's called When Did I Get Like This? And that book sort of explores all the different times that I completely went to the cuckoo side and what always began as a very honest attempt to do what was best for my kids, right? Like we're told in every ad, everything you see, don't you want what's best for your children? Of course you want what's best for your children, right? Nobody doesn't want what's best. Mm-hmm. But then you get led down the garden path. Well, if you want what's best, then you have to use these flashcards and, make your own baby food and that kind of thing. So over and over again in my parenting life, in my early parenting life, I found that I would say to myself, I am not going to overthink it this time. I am not going to overthink what nursery school my kid goes to, or what I feed them, or what shows they watch and how much screen time they get. I'm going to be completely calm about this. And then I would usually get completely wrapped up in overthinking it. So I feel like I understood the idea of What Fresh Hell very well, because there's always something new. Like you think you got it all under control, and then something pops up. Like motherhood is sort of a whack-a-mole thing, particularly when you have multiple kids, and you're just putting out the fire of the day. And so, yes, there's always something like this. There's always a kid who forgot a backpack or a kid who's throwing up. I mean, there's always something.
Now, Amy, tell us some of the topics. Do you remember some of the things that you actually discussed on the show? Because I'm sure if you discussed them, some other parents are going through them.
Sure. So, I mean, we just recorded an episode yesterday that was actually about gaming. So this is going to be an upcoming episode on gaming, Fortnite, Xbox, Minecraft, things like that, that are a larger part of our kids' lives than they were, at least of our lives. Although some parents certainly have grown up playing video games. And are you supposed to keep them totally out? Are you supposed to say, anything goes, it doesn't matter? We always do a combination of reaching out to our listeners on social media and sort of asking them for their opinions. And we get some really interesting insight from our listeners. And then we combine that with some research. We looked at studies. So in this episode, the first segment was, here are all the things about video games that actually work pretty well. Here are all the pros. And then the second segment was, here are all the cons that are going to make you nervous. And then in the third segment, here's how to make it work for you. We try in every episode to have actual concrete takeaways, because it's always worth having a lot of laughs about whatever the topic is. But if you're going to listen to the show, we want you to come away with, I think I can try that. I think I can work on that. Or just, I'm decide not to worry about that. That's okay too. We want you to come away having learned something from listening.
So parents can actually get in touch with you either during the show or after the show and add their own opinions and put their own 2 cents in there.
Yes, that's right. I mean, social media makes that easy. So we have a really active Facebook page and group. And what's good about a Facebook group is that once people join that, they can talk to each other. So we actually have a couple thousand parents in our Facebook group, and somebody will go on there and say, help, I need some potty training help. This 2.5-year-old is driving me nuts. And other members of the group will step in and give them advice. And it's become something that we oversee, but don't even have to participate in that much. But yeah, it's very easy to send us feedback on Twitter, Instagram, things like that. And we really do fold it into the show. And of course, emails.
Amy, I'm just wondering, before Corey has another question, do you find that most of them are the baby, 0 to 3 years old, the new moms who come in? Or is it as they get older, the problems get bigger and better?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit of both, right? We just did a survey of our listeners, and we found that about 2/3 of them do have kids under 6 at home. And about half of them are either not done or don't think they're done having babies. So that was very useful information for us. And it's a great way, the information you can get now on the internet and is so useful. And to aggregate that, it's really helped us create content and envision our typical listener as somebody with young kids. I mean, it makes sense to me that I think somebody with young kids who's really in it, who's soaking in it, as you used to say in those old Palmolive ads, they are in it. They want to hear from moms who are like them, who have gone through this stuff, who can offer them companionship and support. But then, yes, we do offer stuff for moms of older kids too, because as you said, the problems get more, it's different. Of course, it's different when your kids get a little older. It's not hard in the same way, but the problems they have, they're bigger.
Yeah. And like you said before, between the two of you, you got 6 kids spanning a pretty diverse age range. And every chapter of a child's life is a completely different challenge. And it's very hard for parents.
Yes, and you do see things coming back. Like we talked about giving kids space to grow. There was one episode on that. And that really does apply to a 1.5-year-old and a 16-year-old in different ways, of course. But the way that kids go off on their own and then come back and check with you and then go off and check with you. I mean, the way that they go off and the time that they go off gets longer. The rope gets longer, but they do come back and check in. And it's okay to let them do that no matter how old they are. So we find that we think our favorite episodes have things that you can apply to all times of parenting, not just toddlerhood or teenagerhood.
Before we move on, I just want to let the people know that you are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Corey Kaufman, along with Bill Horan, and today we're talking with Amy Wilson, co-host of What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood, a podcast that originates right here on Long Island. So what I want to know, there's a term that seems very interesting to me. What is competitive parenting?
Well, these days, it's just something that I think has come up maybe in the last 20 years that, just as I was saying before, how there's information on everything and we can use that for good. We can see, what ages our listeners' kids are, but we can also use all that information for ill. We can see how somebody's kid is ranking in Little League and how ours isn't. And there's no way in which our kids aren't competing. No arena in which they can't do something a little bit better or a little bit less better than somebody else. And so therefore, parenting, there's no arena in which we aren't kind of watching the people around us. And I think society sort of makes fun of helicopter parents. Like, well, stop hovering all the time. Stop worrying about that stuff. Why are you obsessing over nothing? Well, because you tell us to, right? Every ad, every newspaper, every talk show, everything tells you about the new thing that you're supposed to freak out about your kids this week. And so it is our assignment. And then we look around us all the time at who's doing this a little better than me. And of course, we all think as parents, and I think particularly as mothers, that we're doing everything wrong, that everybody else is doing it better than us, that we're the only one who feels like we're not succeeding on a Tuesday morning. We can't get anything right. We can't even get the oatmeal right. And that weighs on us. And to sort of break through that and push back on that it's a us or them mentality instead of we're all in this together. And sometimes we all have hard days. That's where I think that the podcast comes in as a way to just make yourself feel a little bit better about your parenting and a little bit less alone. Like we hear from our listeners that they listen to us while they're making dinner, while they're driving their kid to practice, while they're, wherever they go, we're sort of in their ears while they're folding the laundry. And we love that. We like the idea that we're keeping people company during the hardest parts of their parenting.
Mm-hmm. Amy, I have to tell you, I just had a fantastic idea while you were answering Corey's question. And since this is your business, I'm going to share it with you. And if you're the first one, you talked about competitive parenting. Okay. Now, we know on July 4th, we watched that hot dog eating contest, competitive eaters, right? How about Labor Day? We have competitive Parents' Day. Who can change diapers more quickly? Who can get a kid to get in his pants or put his socks on or take his socks off? And if you had one of the major hospitals or medical professions sponsoring this, I think that's a win-win. So I'm going to be watching ESPN on Labor Day this year, looking to see your company being part of all this and have the competitive parent. And of course, you'll win the first year because you're the expert. But
because I've done it.
I think there's room to grow there.
It's going to be right before the spelling bee.
Now, as an expert, what have you seen or have you seen how parenting has changed since you were kids? Now, you're not that old. I mean, let's say maybe a 20-year span since you were a child and now you're having children. Has it changed, and in what way?
Well, most profoundly because of screens and the internet, that I have seen my children's childhood versus mine. Their social lives are much more tied to their phones, to like playing Minecraft with their friends on a Friday night instead of going somewhere with their friends. And I don't think that's all bad. I really don't. The good that I see in that is my kids have friends who move away, who come back to town, who leave town, whatever. They're very in touch with all of these friends. If I ask my 17-year-old how his friend is doing who moved away 3 years ago, like he knows what he's up to. Now, maybe it's in a superficial way. Maybe like, what football game he went to last and you don't know, is he doing okay emotionally? It's a superficial knowledge, but there's this way that they're all in contact with each other that I think is actually really nice. Now, of course, that can get very pressured too, right? You have to look beautiful in a photo and you have to put the right filters on it before you can post it. That's the bad part. But I do see them have a sort of greater ease and depth of contact with their friends and their cousins. I think homework is a lot harder for my kids than it was when I was in school. I think that sports has gotten, I mean, speaking of competitive, it's become something that you can't sort of just dabble in. I mean, you can dabble in, but if you want to be on the high school basketball team, you have to have been thinking about basketball from a pretty young age and prioritizing it. You can't just sort of kick a ball outside, right, until high school and then go try out for the basketball team. Like, you won't make it, or if you do make it, you won't play, because the kids who play have been narrowing their focus onto one sport. I'm not sure that's good, but I see it happening.
Yeah. So do your parents listen to the podcast?
They sure do.
Yeah, what do they think
my
of
parents
it?
are grandparents, of course, and they do. We have a small but fervent grandparent population who listens because, this stuff is universal. And I'm realizing as my kids get older, I'm seeing my own parents through a different phase of life. I mean, their kids are all long grown, but we're still their kids. And what I was saying before about going away and coming back, I mean, I do that with my own parents. When times get hard for me, when I'm really struggling with something, I call my mom, I call my dad and talk to them about it. And that still hasn't changed. And I see my parents in a new way now as my kids get older, that they're still thinking about us and worrying about us. Have you heard the saying that a mother is only as happy as her unhappiest child? It's true.
I'm afraid so, yes.
It's true. And I think I've burdened my mom a lot over the years because she's the one who can make me feel better. She's the first person I turn to. And that's a nice place to be, but it's also a hard place to be sometimes.
Well, you also provide access for other people who may not be as fortunate to have a mom so close or alive or accessible that they can listen to your podcast and get other ideas from similar parents who have experienced either the same thing or very similar things. Now, what, from your growing up, were there ways that you were raised that you really liked the way your parents did something and you want to repeat? Do you remember some of those?
Sure. I mean, I'm trying to recreate. I really did grow up with the come home after school and put on your, play clothes and then go outside and come home when the church bells rang at 6:15 because then it was time for dinner. I grew up in suburban Pennsylvania and, just like played Barbies with my friends after school, played wiffle ball in the backyard. There was there were no pitching coaches and Mandarin classes. It was just like go outside and make something up to do and have fun. I think that's a kind of a lost art for our kids. And I think it's really, really important for them to have. So I try in ways large and small, particularly when the weather is nice, to have my kids be outside doing something that is uncurated by adults.
And
it's
isn't it
not
fun?
Practice, it's just play.
Thinking back to your wiffle ball days, you could play a full game of wiffle ball with two people. You made up your rules. If they hit it 30 feet, it was a single. 45 feet was a double. Or if it hit the sewer or hit the tree, it was a do-over. And it actually made it fun and problem-solving and a lot of life's lessons. I think we all learned from kickball, punchball, depending, what area you played in and what was the popular game. But we solved things, got over them, and we didn't have to go to court to determine if it was a double or a triple and, need a lawyer for fourth graders. So
Right. And nobody was getting Tommy John surgery when they were 11 years old either, right? You were just playing some wiffle ball.
Any things you don't want to repeat that you say, I remember my mom did that, and I'm never going to do it?
No, my parents were great. It's funny. Some of the stuff we ate, right? Like the
liver,
the Kool-Aid and Twinkies and Wonder Bread. I think my kids eat a lot better than I did. I mean, I had like pixie sticks every day after school. I'd walk to the corner and get the grape soda and the onion rings. I mean, I had a steady diet of that stuff, and I keep it away from my kids to some extent. But it's funny, they really own that, particularly my high schoolers who are both athletes. They think about what they put in their bodies a lot more than I did as a kid. And I think that's probably for the better.
And that's a good thing. Sure. So good and bad, change is good.
Yeah, exactly.
And this one might be a little hard to answer, but how has disciplining children changed from 30 years ago to now? You can't really, I feel like parents are more or less more hands off with children when it comes to like if they misbehave. Parents aren't really parents. We don't really hit kids anymore. Parents have kind of learned that you have to talk to your kid to actually get across to them if they did something wrong.
Yes, that's true. Right. So like we're all in agreement. You're not supposed to spank your kids. or hit your kids. But yes, when I was growing up, that sort of like distant but distinct possibility existed in the corners of my awareness, if you feel me. So you knew there was only so far you could push things, or like you'd get the look, and the look was all you needed. You shut it right down. You knew where the line was, and the line was not to be crossed. It's good we don't spank our kids. I'm not pro spanking, but I do think that yes, that line got harder to draw once that was taken away. So then your tool in your arsenal becomes yelling. And I have been a yeller. I still sometimes yell at my kids. I mean, I've gotten better at it because I've worked on it. I've tried. The problem with yelling is that it kind of feels good in the moment, but it doesn't really work. Or it will work, but then your kids quickly realize it's to be ignored. It's nothing, it's all bark, no bite. And so then you have to yell more. You have to up the stakes. You have to yell more to get the same reaction. It's just ineffective.
Right. You're not communicating. You're just being aggressive.
Yeah. So if physical discipline is not available to us and yelling is ineffective, then sort of what do you got? Right. So that is something that I think is different from our parents, and it's good and bad.
So what can you do?
Gosh, I mean, take the phone away, right? Like that's the number one currency for teenagers. Although even that I read something from a psychologist, a parenting expert that was specific to teenagers, saying like, be careful about that. Like, don't take your kid's phone for a month. Like, as I was saying before, their lives are in that device now. Like you're going to inflict huge costs on your child by not letting them communicate with anybody for a month. Like that's a bigger punishment than you realize it is. And I felt like, oh, I can't take the phone either. Come on, what is it?
So I just want to let the people know that you are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Corey Kaufman, along with Bill Horan, and today we're talking with Amy Wilson, co-host of What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood, a podcast that originates right here on Long Island.
Amy, I just have to chime in on the spanking. I do have to take a little different approach now that I'm an adult, because when my father would come home and I did something bad, he would say to me, do I have to spank you? And that helped me to learn to be a negotiator. And I eventually became a lawyer. So I had to negotiate with him and find a way to blame mom. Wait, mom told me this, or do you understand? Mom said this and that. And, sometime it would work, sometime it wouldn't. But another life skill was learned. How about today? What's your feeling on putting children's pictures on the internet and sending these out all over? Is that a good thing, bad thing? Do you have any feedback from parents, or do you take a strong position on that?
I think this is something kind of I've learned in real time. So like I said, my kids are 12, 15, and 17. And I was probably more free with sharing information and photos about them when they were younger. One, because they're adorable, right? Two, because they don't have a point of view on it. My 3-year-old doesn't care about a picture being posted of him on Facebook. But it's gotten more complicated for me. I think that what we as parents need to do is have a plan around it. Don't just sort of default to doing whatever everybody else is doing, or, letting the grandparents post everything. Like, you need to have a sort of policy in place, which again, this is the overthinking one. My co-host would probably say, we're completely overthinking that it's a problem. And I would push back and say, yeah, but you need to have a policy in place for yourself. Like, I don't ever post a picture. For example, I don't ever post pictures of my kids that says where they go to school or has identifying features of our address or something on there. I don't post pictures of my kids now that they're old enough to care without asking permission. I don't post pictures of other people's kids without asking permission. I have in the past, but I've changed that. I've gotten more deliberate about it because I think that social media, the default is open sharing. They want us to share more because they want to pull more of our information, and it's ours. So I think having a policy around it that you think about and that you have consistency with. If you don't want your baby's picture on the internet, you're going to have to tell the grandparents, and that might disappoint them. But if you have a policy you can explain, do it ahead of time before it's a problem.
I will say that my mother used to do that a lot when I was growing up, and she still does it. And I did care. I did care a lot, like, especially when I was like a teenager. It's like, oh, I don't want my picture just out there and people commenting on it. It can do something weird to a kid's self-esteem. And it's just like, it's all about kind of privacy. At least ask, I would say.
And
there's something that's ephemeral about it. You think it's ephemeral, but it's not, right? The trail is there, and we've given our kids this digital trail without asking them first, which I think we're all reconsidering a little bit at this point.
Amy, we've been talking so much about this, your podcast, What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. If someone wants to listen to that, tell us how we go about that, where we can hear it.
Yeah, so podcasts are exploding in popularity, and I think the people who aren't listening yet think that it's somehow expensive or complicated, or they don't know how. Your phone, if it's an iPhone, comes with the Podcasts app installed, and if it's an Android phone, comes with the Google Podcast app installed. So you just pull up the Podcast app on your phone, and you can search for What Fresh Hell in the app, and you'll find us that way. And then you just hit subscribe or follow, and then you just get the episodes on your phone for free, and then you listen to them when you want. If you listen on Spotify, that's an app I really like for podcasts because you can actually search in there for topics. So say you're potty training your kid and you want advice on that, you can search podcast episodes and then get a return for that episode in specific, and then you can listen to them. I mean, articles are great too, but a podcast is something you can listen to while you're pushing the stroller and get some ideas. So I love getting them that way. And then you can also listen on a smart speaker. If you have a smart speaker in your house, you just say, hey, smart speaker, put on the latest episode of What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood, and it will play, just like radio stations. You can pull up radio stations that way as well.
And if people want to hear the show again for our audience, they can go to nccradio.org, hear the podcast of What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood with Amy Wilson. They can easily get that and then go on to your podcast, listen to it, and let some of their friends and neighbors know, perhaps their grandparents, and they want their daughter, their son to know about this. A good way to get the word out there. Amy, we want our audience to know that today we've been talking to Amy Wilson. She's the co-host of the show What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. She's been telling us all about parenting, and we want Amy to thank you for being with us today. I'm Bill Horan. I'm here with Corey Kaufman. You've been listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC at ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.